Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Christy Thompson, and I am the Sales and Marketing Director here at BIS Technology Group. And today we're going to be discussing the 411 on how hackers are infiltrating your systems. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. You probably already know Phillip Long, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to him. So Phillip Long, he is our CEO here at BIS Technology Group, but he's also a technologist and entrepreneur, and he specializes in technology solutions and security consulting to businesses along the Gulf Coast. He's worked in the IT industry for over 20 years, and he's worked with 600 plus clients, and he is the CEO and entrepreneur of 5 businesses, and he's also a certified information systems security professional, and that is a certification backed by the Department of Defense. And before I turn it over to Phillip, just a few housekeeping items. We're going to keep everybody muted until the very end, then we'll open it up for questions. Along the way, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat there, and we'll be monitoring that throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Phillip?
Great. Thank you, Christy, and I appreciate everybody attending today. All the events that we've done in recent past, I really think this is probably one of the most security focused that we've done, and one of the probably really kind of cutting edge kind of thing. So I want to jump right in and respect your time the very best I can here for everyone today. I want to introduce Miss Danielle Painter. She is with a company called Huntress, and they provide really threat detection and response. It's kind of a new term we'll learn today together. They call it MDR, which is Managed Detection and Response, and we'll get there in a second. But this is something pretty new. So everybody, welcome Daniel to the webinar. Daniel, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well, Phillip. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited to chat with you guys about security and about the way that Huntress can protect with specific types of threats that we're seeing today.
That's right. Cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about Huntress. A lot of times, I don't get specific into products, but really this is a very unique product, and it is, it's something that is not out there for a while. So tell me a little bit about Huntress, and I'll kind of go to the next slide talking about the CEO and the founder of the company. How long's Huntress been around? Give us a little bit of background, Danielle.
Sure, yeah, happy to. So we've been around as a company for about 4 years. We've only had a product on the market for about 2 years, though. So we're still relatively new on the scene. As we talk more about what MDR, that's the kind of classification of our tool is, it's a bit of an emerging layer of security. It's kind of like on the cutting edge of where we see security products. So this type of product really wasn't around more than a couple of years ago. Which is really interesting. So I'm really pleased to be able to tell you guys a little bit more about how we can add on top of what you guys are already doing in terms of like on top of your firewall, on top of your AV. But one really important thing to note about the product is that we've got a really solid leadership team. So you can see on the right-hand side there, that is our CEO. His name is Kyle Hanslovan. On the left, on the picture on the left, he's the one on the right. The gentleman on the left, in case you guys haven't recognized him already, that's General Alexander. So Kyle spent 10 plus years doing offensive cybersecurity warfare on behalf of the NSA. And he actually won the award for being the top performer during his time at the NSA from General Alexander. He also won DEFCON Capture the Flag. So DEFCON, for those of you guys that aren't familiar, it's like the end-all be-all of hacker conferences. It's a really big security-focused conference. And the Capture the Flag competition, you can think of this as like the World Series of hacking, right? These guys go up against teams from all over the world, the best hackers from all over the world. And our founding team, including Kyle, they actually took home the prize that year. So they won the World Series of hacking, so to speak. So we've got a really good kind of basis to develop a product that could really help to address some of the gaps in security. And these guys know this so well because they used to live it and breathe it when they were at the NSA.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about this. Going to be a new term for all the folks here on the call, I'm sure. But and again, it's a new term in that you guys are you've been around for 4 years, really been selling a product for 2 years. So in really the scheme of life, this is something that is in essence brand new, and so this term is somewhat new, not as new as probably your company. There's been other forms of ways to manage this, but managed detection and response, what is that in layman's terms?
Yep, so that in layman's terms is really just threat hunting. So managed detection and response, really what we do with Huntress is we're actively hunting for threats that are already in existence on your device. Like it says here, right, like post-breach security. So once there's already been an incident that's bypassed all of your other awesome preventive security layers that are in place, Huntress will say, hey, we actually located something that wasn't caught by all of our other preventive security tools. So we'll be able to identify that threat, tell you guys a little bit more about it, but most importantly, give you the steps that you need to take in order to go in and make sure that that foothold, or that threat, as we call it, is cleaned up.
Yeah.
And on this page, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead and finish up. I was going to add one comment to that, but go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, so Gartner classifies us as managed detection and response. Here on this one, you can see, right, they advise that companies add on an MDR solution before investing in more security monitoring tools, like a SIM tool, or even like other types of threat detection, or even before hiring associated security staff and expertise. So Gartner actually really believes that MDR is going to be one of the tools that we see move to one of the forefronts of the security space in the coming year.
Great. And I'm gonna put that down into a little bit more layman's terms for the audience here. There's a lot of tools that are out there. Some some other tools. I'm gonna define what a SIM is. You can see that on the screen there. It's security information and event management, and really what that is. This is what banking industry, credit card industry, a lot of medical practices are now getting these types of services put in place. And really what they are is they're collecting the logs off of the machines in near real time, and it ultimately they're then looking at the logs of a computer, and a computer logs everything, right? And so and then they look for anomalies. They're using artificial intelligence, and they're looking for anomalies that they respond to, usually with a security operation team. And in my way of thinking, and I don't want to upset the host there, my guest rather, but this is really a poor man's SOC. It's a very value-based security operations center, in that in the same way you guys have a team of professionals that are looking over the systems in near real time, and really hunting and trying to proactively find something on these machines. Would that be a pretty common way of saying that?
Yeah, Philip, I have to agree with you on that, right? So SIEM is right for large enterprise companies, right? SIEM is a great tool if you guys have like a security staff of 20 plus employees, right, that are focusing just on the security of your company. And that's like, within the greater umbrella of IT. A lot of small businesses, it does not make any sense to add on something like a SIEM, right? Because a SIEM is only as good as the person that's managing those alerts.
That's right, exactly. So, one other term that I think that I will define here is the Gartner. Gartner is really the data collector of all IT. They're the Bible for IT. They do a lot of in the industry as far as picking the guys who are winners and losers and who's doing the best, and really a lot more than just that. So I wanted to define that. And really, I think this is definitely your guys' approach. Really, the best defense is a good offense. And, one of the things is the bad guys only have to be right once, and we have to be right all of the time. And defensively is where most IT companies really, not only the IT company in a large, but the tools that are out for IT companies in preventing security, most of them are defensive. This is one of the a newer type way that's offensive. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yep, nope, that's absolutely correct, right? So Huntress purposefully is an offensive tool, right? There are certain types of attacks that, just to put it simply, are never going to be caught by antivirus. And that's the gap in your security stack that we're looking to address. So we're looking to identify when threats have slipped past your AV because it's unavoidable. It's just going to happen. And then we can identify them so that we can actually do something about them.
Yep. And really from a high level security threats, I like to kind of break everything down into 4 quadrants, of which we're going to talk about your product, this, managed detection and response, or it's often referred to as persistence, and we'll define why they want to classify this or call this persistence here in a minute. But there's really, from a high level security point, there's vulnerabilities that happen because of patches, misconfigured firewalls, and password management is huge. Of course, misconfigured firewalls, and then of course we have this component here where we're talking about this persistence that we're going to really define, and we'll talk more about that as kind of the day goes on. But from a high level security threat, what are you seeing? I mean, what are you guys seeing on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so we see threats that are actually leveraging Windows against you, which is kind of interesting, right? So we see threats that are bypassing AV because they're actually using some of Windows core services in order to deploy their attacks. And when you really think about that, antivirus can't stop Windows from running, even if they detect that something suspicious has popped up. Because if that happened, it would essentially break your device and completely interrupt your day. Right? So with Huntress, we're able to detect some of that stuff because, again, by taking this different type of approach to security, one thing I want to be really clear about with this tool is that we're not a preventative solution, right? We're not going to stop anything from coming through on your network, but that actually gives us a ton of freedom to be able to detect the things that have slipped past, right? So in that type of situation, when Windows is being used against you, right, when a bad actor has deployed an attack via Windows itself, Huntress will be able to identify that, whereas antivirus and other preventative security tools won't be able to see something like that.
Yeah. And some common compromises, we're talking about what you've already mentioned there, security product invasion. Whereas, back in the day, I'll never forget, I had a client, this has been some years back. And, for me, you guys form a challenge for me, I'll be honest with you, because, really the bad actors make the challenge because they're coming up with newer, craftier ways to, to infiltrate into systems so they can exfiltrate the data. So there's companies like you that come along to try to plug these gaps into the our solution stack, our security stack. But I want to try to in my way, try to explain how they're using Windows against itself and why the antivirus that most people, they claim, that's the thing. And I guess I'll need to complete my first thought where you had a client said, well, how come I have to have all these different products? Why do I gotta have a firewall? Why do I have to have this or that or the other? And ultimately, it's because the bad actors are always looking for new ways. And in this particular area where you're talking about Windows being able to basically be used against itself, that's extremely difficult to manage because it's a process that Windows needs to run itself, and they basically hijack it. But go ahead and tell us some of these other threats that you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see a lot of the abuse of trusted applications with Huntress. So that's not just Windows, but that's if a bad actor, let's say, manages to exfiltrate data, but they're only doing it when you guys are, making some type of change to Dropbox, right? As Dropbox syncs to your cloud, right? That's the kind of thing that antivirus won't be able to detect because they obviously can't block Dropbox itself from running. So this is another type of thing that we see a lot, fileless malware attacks, right? Attacks that are deployed without any type of file for antivirus to inspect. Therefore, it just passes right through. We see a lot of partially remediated incidents too. That's where, like an AV will go in and it'll clean up an infection for the most part, but there's still pieces of that infection kind of laying in wait on that device. nothing to be super concerned with, but still something you want to get on your device, right? You don't want any remnants, or we call them malware artifacts, right, of a past attack existing on that device, right? And of course, click happy end users, that's an issue no matter what you do, right? It's extremely difficult to detect a really good phish these days. We've even seen cases of like specific types of ransomware being deployed via like an ad that you guys would click on. And that's to no fault of your own, right? It's just to show you that like with specific types of clicks, even if it's like a totally normal ad, that could even distribute something malicious too. So these are kind of the common ones that we see a lot of.
Yeah, and as we get into this a little more, we're going to get a little more technical, but I mean, to me, the way that I see this in common language is that where, basically they get the end user, us, to click on something. And it's really not even malicious, maybe what we actually downloaded onto the computer. It's something that basically, though, then will run in a timer, and then it'll go out and it'll create a monster. Basically, it'll go out onto the web and it'll pull down more files, and it'll use JavaScript, or it'll use, the command prompt. It'll use all these other Windows tools to make basically a really major problem for you.
Yep, that's exactly correct.
Yeah, and then of course, it's not just Windows. It's also, it can be, applications, and that's another thing is why it's so important to, not only have a proactive, tool to be looking for this, but also, to be patching the systems, not only patching the Windows operating system for, or the iOS if you're running Mac, but also the applications as well. I always like to throw that in there because a lot of times people never even think, they think that, the day of, don't update it because it'll break something. And really, the risk of breaking is one risk, but the risk of not patching is a greater risk. And really, today's environment, you've got to patch your applications as well as the operating system. Mm-hmm. So walk me through a timeline, like a breach timeline, what you guys see on a day-to-day basis.
Sure, yeah. So what you see here, the compromise phase, that's when, you click on something that maybe, you didn't know was malware. Obviously, nobody ever knows that it's malware, right? But maybe you click on something, maybe it's like a USB that's inserted into a device that's been compromised. That's this compromise phase. So that takes seconds or minutes to be compromised. After that, what's going to happen is the bad actor is going to try to exfiltrate data, right? And that can be for hours, days, weeks. We've even seen it for months, right? What's the issue here with this timeline is that this type of thing normally takes weeks or months to discover this type of activity. And that's too long, right? If a bad actor has access to your device and they're exfiltrating data, waiting weeks or months, the average time frame to discover a type of infection like one that we would detect with Huntress without this tool is 100 days. Yep. So if you think about what kind of damage can a bad actor do on your device in 100 days, probably quite a bit.
And then, of course, containment is, that's where they actually figured it out. Now we gotta go scan all the systems. We got to figure out really what happened and make sure, there's no remnants on the machine and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the process of getting that infection off of that device, which will happen, immediately after you discover it, right? It's just discovering it, that's the difficult part. And then if you move on to the next slide, I'll show you what we want to do with Huntress, right? So using this tool, we want to say, okay, well, we can't stop this compromise phase from happening, right? But what we can do is we can help to discover this type of infection before it has the chance to exfiltrate data. So if we can discover that a bad actor has established a presence on your device, right, has already infected your device before they start to exfiltrate data, that would lead to quicker containment and hopefully prevent that phase from happening altogether.
Yeah, and that's right. That's really, it's all about, in your solution, it's really all about, basically one of the systems have failed you, your antivirus has failed you, let's say it real simple, and ultimately, and antiviruses, they do fail, they fail often. And ultimately, then it would be, oh, okay, we have something happen and we want to find out about it as absolutely quickly as possible so we can stop it so that they can't steal information from us.
Mhm. Yep, and unfortunately, that's the reality. Antiviruses do fail. Antivirus is an absolutely necessary product in your security stack, though. It's to no fault of antivirus either. It's just the way that these tools were built. They don't see specific types of infections. So we created a tool that would see those specific types of infections, so that when those types of infections do come through, we can detect it so that your team, right, can go in and clean it up as quickly as possible.
Yeah. One of the things that that we have seen, we've been using the tool on some of our clients. I've gone out and talked to them. This is kind of our launch point here. And again, like I said earlier, this is the tough part of my job, is that I got to go back to the well and talk to clients and say, listen, guys, this is something that's relatively new to the market. It's something I feel like you need, because this is one of the main quadrants that the bad actors are stealing data from you. This is a major risk for your organization. But one of them is that we found that, like when you go to log onto a computer, how you have that magnifying glass on it, and they had changed the magnifying glass to a command prompt. So basically, if you go to a machine that's locked out, right, you got to put a username and password in to get into it. Now all you do is you click on the magnifying glass, and boom, you're to a command prompt, which allows you to to start to have access to that computer, to have root access to it. And I guess there's a lot of other things that are out there, in the market that that we've seen as well. But that's just one of them that's very simple that you guys caught right away.
Gosh, yeah, that's no good, right? If you can think about it, I mean, that's definitely something that you don't want to happen to your device. And one of the points too that I want to stress about these specific types of infections, I mean, our team knows it really well, because at the NSA, our founders, their whole goal was long-term persistent access on enemy devices, right? So what they did essentially is they reverse engineered a lot of these techniques that they used to launch attacks onto the devices of other countries, and they turned that into a security product that can detect when those same types of threats that these guys used to use all day, every day, are happening to you. And that's really how we came up with Huntress. And the tool is really like, we compare it to like a doctor's office visit, right? So if you go to the doctor, the doctor can't prevent you from getting sick, but when you go for regular checkups, right, regular physicals, that can increase the odds that we're going to detect something and detect it early, right? So that we can go in and get it cleaned up as quickly as possible. And threat hunting is the exact same way. We can't prevent an incident from happening, but what we do is we try to detect it as early as we possibly can, so that we can clean it up before it has the chance to cause additional damage.
Yeah, and let's walk me through this next set of slides of ultimately, and I like what you said earlier about ultimate, like what we're protecting against is the same thing that these guys at the NSA, they're trying to put some persistent type of data collector or remote control access or something like that on a machine, so they can just live there and they can steal data, they can explore what's on the other side of the firewall, explore more about the network to get themselves deeper and deeper and deeper. And ultimately they call that a foothold. So you jump in here and walk me through this next slide.
Hey, Danielle, before we move forward, we did have a question come in. Why can't your tool detect what you are describing as well as what antivirus does, so that Huntress could take the place as a robust antivirus? Sorry, I know y'all were on that, so I wanted to go ahead and jump in there.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So Huntress is a tool that detects what slips through the cracks of AV. So unfortunately, we only know about it once your AV hasn't caught it, right? So if your AV has caught it, then we won't necessarily know about it. So we're just focusing on a different layer of security, right? We didn't want to create another antivirus because, there's so much competition out there. There's tons of different AVs that you guys can choose from. What we wanted to do was something totally different. We wanted to create something that truly addressed a gap in your security stack, right? Rather than combining us with a tool like antivirus, where there's hundreds of great antiviruses out there. So our focus is, let's focus on this niche area and let's do it really well.
Yeah, and one of the things too is that we all know we can't all be all things to all people. And there has been products that have come out like that have tried to do that, and they're always, they're subpar because of the vastness of what's going on in the marketplace. And if you really looked at our solution stack, or we call it a defense in depth solution stack, we are addressing a lot of different areas, vectors, threat vectors, and we're addressing them using different products, primarily because one product is going to do really well in an area and not so well maybe in another area. So it's really that defense in depth strategy is where you're filtering your traffic, if you will, and you're filtering it with different officers, and some are specialized in one particular area in email, one's more, in the firewall area of watching traffic come in and out, one's on the endpoint like this product. So I just threw that in there, but let's talk a little bit about kind of how this works. So basically you've got your victim, right? And then walk me through this slide,
Yep.
Daniel.
So what will happen is a bad actor will establish a persistence mechanism on your device, and they'll use different applications, right? Applications that you guys use every single day in order to exfiltrate data. So this red block here on this square, right? So this is your victim device, right? Or this is your computer, this is your server, whatever it may be. And this red square here is the foothold that the bad actor is using to exfiltrate data. So this is just a visual representation of a foothold. So a foothold, for those of you that aren't familiar, is it's basically a bad actor that gains access to a device using like a backdoor, for example. If you think about it, if I'm a bad actor, right? Let's say I decided to change my profession and I went into like being a cyber criminal, right? If I'm a bad actor, if I have to make you click on my perfectly crafted fake resume email attachment that you guys would download and then get infected by, if you got to do that every single day so that I can get into your device every single day, it's not going to be effective time-wise, right? And it's certainly not going to be cost-effective either for me. So if I'm a bad actor, thinking from their perspective, right, I want to make sure that you guys, once you click on that thing that you shouldn't have been clicking on, I want you to click on it once, and then I'm going to save a piece, like I'm going to save a little door, and access to your device so that I can come back and turn around and leak data or deliver additional malware, or even come around and ransom your devices through like CryptoLocker or other types of ransomware. So this is just a way to make my job easier as a cyber criminal, to make sure that I constantly have access to your device.
Yeah, and some common footholds are, like boot up, where that's basically when your computer is starting up. And then, of course, whenever you're logging in, it can run scripts and do things. And then, of course, process execution. And I want you to take us through, and we're going to get a little bit technical here, and you're going to see some, some kind of deep in the guts of computers here. But I'm going to let Danielle walk us through how some of these things work, and we're going to, do it in a way I hope everybody can really understand, because of there's these areas of basically where these bad actors are putting these footholds or these back doors in, and they're hiding them throughout the system. And we're just going to show you some areas where they actually hide them inside your system. Let's talk about, what am I looking at here? This is all the way back since Windows 95.
Yeah, so this is a bad actor that's hiding an attack within a run key. And the purpose of this slide here is to show you guys these types of attacks are absolutely nothing new. So we're looking at a Windows 95 device, right? These specific types of attacks have been around for over 20 years. And the reason why they've been around for over 20 years is because they work, right? These techniques are absolutely nothing that's reinventing the wheel here. But they're able to bypass antivirus. And up until now, there wasn't a tool that could detect this kind of stuff. So insert Huntress, right? Now we're able to help identify these, but that just shows you how difficult this stuff is to block. These are not new, and they are still getting through.
Yeah, and here's another one. This is another run key. This is the registry, which is basically telling your computer really at the base level of how the operating system is working. And we see here that there's a backdoor.exe, and it's embedded itself in a run key, and it means that every time that machine runs a particular product, and this happens to be sysinternals, which is actually a Windows component for managing Windows.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep, that's mm-hmm. There's lots of different ways that these bad actors can establish persistence within the core functions of Windows, that's kind of the part that we're addressing. That's the part that's slipping past AV.
Yeah, and to go back to AV, exactly. To go back to AV is that AV is not looking inside of Windows. They're thinking Windows is by definition safe, and if it's not even tuned. That's basically coming through without even a look.
Yep, absolutely.
And of course, in startup, this is where at the time of a boot up, you would have this going on here.
Yep, bad actors will hide their malware and things that start up automatically on your device every time that device restarts.
Yep. And then of course scheduled task, and this again, these are all features that Microsoft, where you could schedule a task. I bet very few people on a day-to-day basis actually schedule tasks, but some tools use it for sure. But this is where you would actually have at a particular time of day, you could run the script, and this is where these guys will basically create the monster. Is that they may need to do something that's going to flash a couple boxes up on the screen, so they'll try to pick a time and run that at night or something like that. They'll schedule that task to run so that you don't actually have eyes on it.
Yep, exactly. And a lot of AV actually whitelists these types of tasks. So whitelisting basically means that AV just lets it happen. They let it go through whatever the process may be for specific types of tasks, like scheduled tasks is one of those, that they just let scheduled tasks do whatever it needs to do because they think that, Windows, like Philip mentioned, is by definition safe, when we know at Huntress that, bad actors will actually abuse scheduled tasks to launch malware.
Yeah. And ultimately, all of them are, they're really morphing, or they're being built. They find something that works, it gets to where the good guys figure it out, the bad guys go back to work. And there was a product called Emotet. As a matter of fact, I just left a client in Pensacola who worked for a big chemical company, and they got hit with that and shut down this very large operation for 2 weeks. And they don't even know because they didn't have a SIM or SOC in place, so they don't really know what data was exfiltrated, and it cost them a ton of money. And I will even say this, just because I'm in the flow of this, they didn't have great cyber liability insurance, and it really hurt them. And that's something that you guys, we can talk offline about that, but that's something that we need to look at that policy to make sure that you guys are covered. So anything you want to add to this slide?
Yeah, so with Emotet specifically, the sister infection of Emotet is a thing called TrickBot. And TrickBot is one of the worst pieces of malware. I guess you could also classify Emotet as one of the worst pieces of malware that we saw all of last year. Will probably continue to be one of the worst pieces of malware that we see this year. Dridex also, what you're seeing on the screen here, is another particularly nasty type of infection. But the worst part about those two is that the bad actor will establish an Emotet foothold or a Dridex foothold that's in existence on your device, and then they'll turn around as early as like 2 hours later, and then they'll drop ransomware, right? So our mission with Huntress is to say, hey, if we can get to this Emotet foothold, right, or we can get to this TrickBot foothold, or if we can get to this Dridex foothold quickly enough, that will prevent that bad actor from having access to that device, prevent that direct line of communication between a cyber criminal and your device, so that they can't turn around and drop something even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I hear now there's a QuackBot out. There's various things. We keep seeing these things morph, and and I don't know how much you can speak to really the funding I mean, some of the development of these bad actor tools are, I mean, it's expensive. I mean, it's expensive to pull that off. I've had some software guys in some groups talking about just how much R&D and how much work. So I mean, these guys are not broke. You know, they're very you know, very well funded.
Yep, and the reason why they're in the cyber criminal business, to put it bluntly, is because it makes them a ton of money. There is a really good upside to being a cyber criminal, right? It's very attractive to people. If you think about it, it's got a very low overhead, right? You don't have to pay for, rent in a building, to open a store, a shop front or anything like that, right? It's not like other traditional types of brick and mortar businesses. It's got an extremely low barrier of entry, right? And that's how they can actually develop so much time and and allocate so many resources to developing these types of threats that are going to bypass AV.
Same thing. Here's just another example where this was actually fired off using a tool, a systems administration tool, and it was in a scheduled task, and it was mining for cryptocurrency using, other systems, and just again, very well orchestrated, very well funded in order to pull that off. Of course, we talked about TrixBot, and that's kind of a, would you class, I mean, the way I describe that in my mind is that these are basically, they're the same kind of concept of Emotet, but it's variations to get past what people have put in place to block it. Is that fair? Where am I missing that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say that TrickBot and Emotet are definitely a part of the same malware family. You'll see that a lot, and that's the reason why we have malware families, is because there's specific variations that bad actors will put on a kind of core type of attack, right? That's got the same types of things happening generally in the same order, right? They just change one or two elements about that attack in order to vary that attack so it bypasses your AV.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this because it's a lot of code and it'll make people tune out, but how does this stuff work?
Sure. So what you guys are seeing on the screen here, this is a very technical example, but essentially what's happening is that there's a PowerShell script that's starting up with the device. So PowerShell is basically saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and start something, right, once this device happens to load. And then what it's actually doing is, if you see down there, kind of near the bottom, right, there's actually calling out to that http server2 bunch of mumbo jumbo.ru. And then it's grabbing this file extension, which is actually a DLL file, right? So what it's doing here is it's phoning out to a domain in Russia using a PowerShell script, right? And it's doing that so that it can actually grab a file from that Russian domain. And this isn't the type of thing that antivirus would be able to even be able to inspect, because DLLs are a lot of times whitelisted by AV tools as well, because DLLs are often associated with legitimate services or legitimate applications, right? Like, for example, Google Updater uses a DLL in order to grab updates, right? So this type of thing isn't something that would even be scanned by antivirus.
Exactly. This, in my mind, and my way of thinking and speaking, is ultimately this is the system creating its own monster, and it's doing it from inside the organization, and it's going out and it's putting its pieces and parts together, calling them up, and they're doing it in such a way that each piece is benign, or it's not being looked at, and then once you get it all put together, it's a monster.
And one other thing that we picked up on here with Huntress, right, that's this middle red circle. The PowerShell script actually inserted some code here to hide all windows and warnings, right? So when something popped up that said, hey, why is PowerShell starting up with this device here? We're not exactly sure what this is doing. This actually inserted code to say, actually, don't show those windows or warnings. And that it was able to, prevent that end user from intervening here, in this case, to phone out to that Russian domain.
Wow. Yeah. So on the end user screen, they're not seeing the web browser pop up or do anything, or a black box pop up. they've written it in such a way that says don't show anything on the screen, do all this behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, this is actually at DattoCon, a breach that you guys found, right?
Yeah. So we actually found this breach, if you guys can believe it. So we had one of our partners deploy Huntress at our booth, right? It's extremely easy to get this thing pushed out. So we had a partner deploy Huntress at our booth, standing up right there with us as they were chatting with us. And then they went around, they walked, and they talked to a couple of other vendors. And by the time that they had circled that conference room floor, we had already detected an incident for them. So they came back and they said, well, can you help me, break this down, like to help me understand what exactly happened here. So this one got flagged because there was a zone update that was happening. That's the first thing that's happening. And a zone update is totally normal, right? What it's doing too is it's also opening up MSHTA. You can see the mshta.exe around the middle there. So MSHTA is just like a Microsoft HTML tool, essentially, but it's a signed Microsoft application. So when your device sees a signed Microsoft application, it's naturally going to want to trust that, right? Because it's something that's supposedly sanctioned by Windows, right? And then it opens up a command prompt, and then it's opening up PowerShell. Right. So what your antivirus sees here, guys, is basically legitimate service after legitimate service after legitimate service being opened up. There is nothing that looks out of place here with antivirus at all. This is business as usual. It doesn't take a security expert though to spot the real issue here. So if you guys look at this download string, right? Something about this just looks off. So this bad actor, this person who launched this attack, they knew that in order to bypass your antivirus, all they had to do was randomize the casing of this download string. So they inserted randomly capitalized and lowercase letters, right? And then it's going to phone out to this link here, bit.ly, which bit.ly is, it's a very reputable domain. There's a lot of legitimate reasons why you guys would want to use bit.ly. So if you guys are using something like DNS security, it wouldn't be blocked. So the point is it phones out to bit.ly, right, to grab a DLL, to grab a type of file that's not going to be inspected by antivirus, right, and get that onto the device. And at this point, the file has been downloaded, it's been injected already into Windows, and then they just do this nice clean thing where they close it out using this window close button, and then you're none the wiser essentially.
Yep, that's and there it is. It's out down again. It's a benign thing, that a script that got put on a machine that Microsoft thinks is cool, and then it goes out and it downloads the monster that again is coming from a legitimate site, and there's no reason to flag it. And then I'm sure beyond that it did even more things. And again, some of these things I've looked at and I've followed them and tracked them. They're 13 layers deep of ways that they execute to get this monster made. And again, and they're doing it all under the radar of the local endpoint, antivirus, as we would call it, security. And so it's really difficult to track. But this is a dashboard. I'll just speak to this because I want to be sure we get to finish with everything. The cool thing for us is that this tool was made with guys like me in mind, and it's basically a plug-in to our system where we get to see exactly what happens when it finds something. We immediately get it, and I'm really astounded at the response rates. We rolled it out on some people, and we have a what I think, more comprehensive than the guys in my peer group, and the guys that I deal with as far as what we call a defense in depth security strategy. And we have found things. And at the speed at which we roll that thing out, and within minutes you guys are finding it, and that's pretty impressive. And I don't know, Danielle, we talked a little bit about that blog. Do you want to go over that real life scenario? Just tell me that story that we talked about when we were kind of prepping for this call. Are you prepared to do that?
Sure, yeah, sure. So with Huntress, we aim to detect things speedily, right? So that's one of the kind of values of our tool. We also have an in-house security research team that works with us on the tool, which is actually another way that we haven't even touched on yet of how we differentiate ourselves from antivirus. So we actually have real security researchers that go in and they analyze the code like the examples that we just saw. They basically say, hey, something here looks suspicious. We're going to dig into this a little bit further and figure out exactly what's going on, right? And from that point, what we do is we alert, your MSP, and we tell you, hey, we found X, Y, and Z on this device, and then we tell them how to go in and clean it up. So we actually had an infection for an MSP that was testing out a new feature that we've got in beta that allows for automatic cleanup, right? That allows for the MSP to say, hey, yep, we approve of those changes, and our agent's actually tasked to go in and run those commands so that that infection can be cleaned up extremely quickly. So we had an MSP that was testing that out right now, and they got hit with a TrickBot infection. TrickBot will have all of your devices infected in under 30 minutes for an SMB. It's extremely fast moving, it's self-propagating. It's basically like playing whack-a-mole to try to squash this thing. And this MSP that was testing out this assisted remediation tool, they used assisted remediation on these devices, and we were able to clean up 23 devices at this client site in under 20 minutes. And this is the type of infection that this takes days, maybe even like a full week to go in and squash.
And oftentimes it would live on there by Gartner data 100 days.
Yep, that's correct. And at that point, like I said with TrickBot, they usually turn around and they'll deploy ransomware. There's no telling when they can go in and do that. That can be 2 hours from now. That can be a month from now. You just never know.
And kind of with the new pattern of the bad actors is why I wanted to have this webinar is to catch it early, is because what they'll do is they'll come in, they'll establish a foothold, they'll get a backdoor, they'll steal whatever data they can sell from you or whatever, if any information that they could find out about you that could further their criminal exploits, steal your client's data, sell it, whatever, and then they ransomware, then they encrypt everything on the way out and they charge you again. And I don't know about you guys, but I know double dipping will get you in trouble, but these guys are doing it all day long. And you said it earlier, why do they do it? It's for the money. And because there's a much higher chance that you're going to get audited by the IRS than they're going to get caught. So, I mean, this is something that is not going away. Ransomware is, they're saying like it's every 14 seconds. Today, in about a year and a half, it's going to be every 11 seconds that specific type of incident. But that's, I think you could just say that my point in that is that these things are ramping up. They're getting worse. They're not getting better. And as a company who protects people, I feel like it's my responsibility to show you guys really what's out there. Another cool thing I like about it is the report. And I like the way you described, okay, there's been no incidents reported. And I like the way that because I said, yeah, well, great. Well, you didn't catch anything. But what was your response? You remember?
Sure, yeah. So on this report, you can see down the bottom, right, 0 incidents reported. That's what's in red, right? So this is the report that Philip can show you guys when you ask what Huntress is doing for you, right? So this is a report that's taken inventory of what's gone on over the last month, but we offer this quarterly as well, right? So even if we don't detect any incidents, if you move one rung up that ladder into the yellow area, there were 9 manual investigations that took place, and that's when those security researchers, right, the ones that I was telling you guys work with us at Huntress, actually went in and they said, this looks way more suspicious than anything we've seen before. We're actually going to go in and make sure that what's happening isn't malware, right? Or if it is, that's when we would have generated an incident for you guys. But it looks like in this case, we didn't report any incidents this month. And that is a really good thing. That is like high five, guys. Like we did everything right this month. That's fantastic. But this is also how you can go ahead and see that Huntress is working, on your behalf to make sure that even the suspicious things that could have very easily been malware are being investigated and being looked at.
That's right. And kind of for us where we're heading, and this is part of a Huntress is part of our stack here, but this is something that is new. A few of you may have seen it that are on the call that are good close clients that I meet with often. But ultimately we're calling MSP3, and this is what I think that all business owners, I ain't talking tech right now, I'm talking business, I'm talking about, half of winning's not losing, some of the things I say, and these are the things that I think every business owner needs to have in place. And ultimately it's prepare, prevent, and prevail. And the prevention is something that we often talk about as IT people, but really preparation, I think, is where you need to start. That's with monitoring dark web, so that you know if one of your employees got their password stolen, because it's a major area of risk. Then really educating your people, and if you're one of our Sentinel clients, you get free cyber security education. But I'll tell you, man, a lot of people don't take advantage of it. And then there's some documents that you need to have in place that we can talk about, some of which your staff need to change. You need to be testing them with phishing emails. Again, top of mind awareness. They're hacking people more than they're hacking systems, and email being your biggest risk. Quickly they click on something, boom, they got a foothold in your system, and they're going to live there on average 100 days. They're going to steal what they can steal, and then they're probably going to whack you with ransomware. And you think you just got ransomware. Well, really, they also stole all your clients' data that may come out later and ruin your reputation. And then also being able to put that all in a format where you're able to see who are your highest risk employees. I think that's very important. And then, of course, the defense in depth strategy. I'm not going to go over all that, but that's all the way from the proper type of email filtering, the antivirus patching, all those things, password management, those things. And then also prevail is something that we really want to talk disaster recovery, business continuity. What does that look like? How long can you be without your data, without your system? We need to have that conversation. That's a business conversation you need to have. Then incident response. If something bad happens and say you got ransomed and they said, hey, I want 50 grand, you need to have good cyber liability insurance that's got 50 grand in Bitcoin readily available, because even if you had 50 grand, you can't get it into Bitcoin. Take you 2 weeks to get that money moved because of the anti-money laundering laws. So, and then also just breach coaching. I'll use the incident that happened at the hospital in Mobile. There was a thing I saw on the news, and the guy had a mic stuck in his face, and he said no comment. Guys, we don't want to say that. We want to have a statement that says, guys, listen, we've done our due diligence, we practiced due care, we've done all the things we can do. I've got a full team of experts, cybersecurity experts, analyzing the situation and keeping me abreast of all things, whatever. You want to have that type of statement and that type of understanding, and really to have somebody there with you during that situation, because I've been there with some companies, and I'll tell you what, I didn't even own the company and my stomach was churning. So we want to just, again, put ourselves in a position where we can really prevail from something bad happening. And I think that's a real business conversation that I'd love to have with, anybody who wants to have it. That's kind of my calling right now in life, I think, is trying to raise the awareness and raise the security here on the coast. And again, these are just those broken down pieces that I want to get you guys. I don't want to use more of your time. Well, I always do this on every deck that I come to. I always say, what should I do? Because really the thing that keeps people from getting where they want to go is action. And I would really encourage you, even prompt you not to bury your head in the sand. We see that, I see that too often. And occasionally I see people who have done that and they get hurt, and I don't rejoice in that. I'm really sad by that. So I want to help. One thing that I will do for you guys is anybody on the call is a free cybersecurity starter pack. Will include that dark web scan, so you can see if you got to change any password for your employees, do a simulated phishing attack to kind of give you an overall picture of how your staff is doing. Cybersecurity training for your entire staff, do a network evaluation to kind of see where is the risk points. A lot of times I see, companies come in, they're like, yeah, we need to do a $15,000 penetration test, and they want to spend a ton of money, when really the client don't even have a firewall. And that's would I like to come in and say, hey, let's just take a look in real terms about what we need to do to move forward. And then also put together a little one-page technology roadmap of the things that I know just from experience that I would focus on. And that's whether you use me or not. Again, I think we offer a good service, but I want to help our industry. I want to help our community. And we'll also, with Huntress being on the call, we'll give you guys a 21-day free trial offer, and we'll resolve the first 3 incidents for free for you guys. We'll drop Huntress. It's like Danielle mentioned earlier, this is something that is very quick to install. It's especially if you're one of my Sentinel clients, I can literally right mouse click, roll it out on your site, and we'll let it run for 21 days. And we'll see, you may have a persistent threat. With a few thousand devices that we manage, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Danielle, I don't know, statistically, there ought to be something there, right?
Yep. Yeah. Usually it only takes a couple hundred devices for us to see something there. And that's just in a very short time window of 21 days.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll also throw that in. It's worth a lot more than $7.99. But anyway, that's my take on it, and that's free for everybody here. All I ask is let me know pretty quick so I can get you on the schedule. As y'all know, Windows 7 is end of life, and we had Server 2008. We had a lot of people wait till the last minute, and we're really busy as a team. But I will absolutely personally come out and take a look and make sure that we're all in good shape for you guys. Now, I guess we'll turn it back over to Christy and see if there's any questions for anybody that anybody had.
Hey, Philip. Yeah, so I think we only had that one question come in that Danielle did a great job of answering. So, yeah, and if y'all have any other questions, I know it's a lot to take in, go ahead and email us at events@askbis.com if any pop up later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going on the record, and I mean, I've seen what's happening in the market, and this is something, and I hate to go back to the well because a lot of people on the call here are my clients who I dearly care about, and I hate having to ask them for more money. But if you talk to me, if we talk about this, and if y'all send me an email and say, I want to know more about it, I'd be happy to talk to you. I'm going to recommend that it's my professional recommendation that you go with this product. Good news is this product is pretty inexpensive, and we can talk about it for you guys. And go over it with you so that I want you guys, of course, fully educated and fully comfortable. Also, somebody asked me about somebody just asked a question about cyber insurance and how does it work. Really, it's a policy that the question was, how does cybersecurity insurance work? And it's a policy just like you would have on an automobile or any other thing. Now, don't confuse this with your like professional liability or errors in omission or any type of insurance like that covers you making a mistake or something like that. This is it's kind of a new world in cyber insurance, and those policies will not cover you. It's kind of like after 9/11, how they came up with new insurance and a lot of extra things we had to do because of terrorism. It really wasn't a threat that we had sunk our teeth into. Well, the world has fully sunk its teeth into cybersecurity threats, and they've come up with a policy. And there's the policy. I actually sell it, and I'll be honest, guys, I don't want to sell insurance. I do, and it's nothing. The policy I have is, I think, excellent. I vetted a bunch of them. It has 13 areas of coverage. It's very inexpensive. I mean, you're probably talking $100 to $150 a month to cover most all businesses, and we throw in the training, the phishing, and all those other things. And one of the reasons why it's so cheap is because we couple it with the education, which lowers the risk not only of the client but also the insurance company. So that's all taken into factor there. So that was really that question that popped up late. So I want to personally thank Danielle for the work that she put in to pull this off with us. So thank you, Danielle.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so happy to be here. And if I could just close by saying, having an MSP, guys, that is going to actually evaluate new security products, that shows that you're in really good hands, right? for Philip to come to us and say, okay, well, we've heard a little bit about Huntress, tell me more, right? That to me shows that he's doing his due diligence on the latest and greatest threats that are out there. Because since he's designing your security stack, he's trying to poke holes in that security stack too to see where's the gaps, right? And that's why we're having this conversation today. So I commend you, Philip, on taking this product to your customers and showing them a little bit more about how threats that slip past antivirus, right, can actually get through, because this kind of stuff is extremely difficult to detect. And like I said, it's a little bit of an emerging layer of security. So it seems like you guys are working with someone who is, on the cutting edge of this kind of stuff, which is great news.
Cool. I appreciate that, and I want to thank everybody for attending. If you got questions, don't hesitate to email, follow up. And Christy, thanks so much for your work in putting it all together. And I will let you all go back to your day. We finished 1 minute early. Y'all have a great day. Stay safe out there.
Thanks, guys.